Veritex. This is a Japanese exclusive developed by Opera House and ISCO and published by Asmik Ace. The game itself is your typical vertical shooter. You get 3 power-ups, your bombs, missiles, and the shield that protects you from bullets. Most of the time, Veritex is kinda easy due to the fact that your ship might be a little too powerful at times. Like this blue weapon. Look at the coverage you get with this. Ships are dying before they even reach the screen. You're untouchable. Then you get to level 4 and the fun stops right about here when every enemy can shoot tons of bullets at a time. Then the boss shows up and bitch slaps you. But it's really the second form that's the problem. It takes forever to kill this thing because you can never line up your shots because it's always spamming 2 different projectiles at all times. Things escalate from 0 to apeshit pretty quickly during the latter half of the game. There are times where you have a long stretch of nothing, and then it becomes a bullet hell. There are a few spikes in difficulty here and there, but they pale in comparison to the final boss. Yeah, I honestly don't understand how the hitboxes work either. Now, we have to talk about the final form. I don't think you're ready for the final form.
What the fuck is that thing?
Seriously, I need earplugs to look at this shit. To be fair, the frame rate would be slightly faster than a PowerPoint presentation if this was on a Super Nintendo. And if you haven't noticed yet, I'm staying in one spot, holding the fire button, and winning. There are plenty of safe zones if you could believe it, and it breaks this fight completely. This boss absolutely sucks, and I have no idea what the hell they were thinking when they designed this fight. Afterwards, you get some Japanese text. Then the credits, which are in English for some reason. 3 composers worked on the music: Hitoshi Sakamoto, Masaharu Iwata, and Yoshio Furukawa. Yes, people who worked on the Final Fantasy Tactics, Gauntlet 4, and Devilish soundtracks worked on this game, and it shows. The Yamaha 2612 is a fickle mistress. Some songs sound like dog shit, but when you have people who understand the hardware, you get music like this. The soundtrack is awesome, probably the best part of the game. Graphically, this game looks decent with some cool parallax scrolling, barely any slowdown, most of the time, and this flooded city stage that fucks with my eyesight and gives me a headache. Some backgrounds can be too busy at times, which makes bullets harder to see. There are some cool bosses, like this mech that lunges at you with the sword, and this bug that loses its head. There really isn't too much to say about Veritex, or too much to differentiate it from the vast library of shoot-em-ups out there. It's okay. It's not that great, to be honest. Play Thunder Force 4 instead. Let me just start by saying this is one of the best looking Genesis games out there. This game does shit I didn't even think was possible on the Genesis. Take this in because this presentation is ridiculous. Even the sound design is killer too. The music is done by Jesper Kyd, who would go on to do music for the Assassin's Creed and Borderlands games. So this is the adventures of Batman and Robin. It's not to be confused with the Super Nintendo version or the Sega CD, those were entirely different games. The Super Nintendo version is done by Konami. This one was developed by Clockwork Tortoise and published by Sega. Clockwork Tortoise was a company founded by people who left Malibu Interactive. They made this game and the Sega CD Batman that was also based on the animated series. That's pretty much it. They went out of business soon after. But this was definitely the high note to go out on. It's a run and gunner that plays more like Contra or Gunstar Heroes. You could do co-op. The downside is that you have to play as Robin, and nobody wants to be Robin when Batman is an option. The plot is that Mr. Freeze plans to freeze Gotham, obviously, while freeing the Joker, Two-Face, and the Mad Hatter from Arkham Asylum to keep Batman busy. You run, shoot, you punch, you do jump kicks, and charge your weapon by letting go of the fire button. You got three options: the green bola weapon that's the strongest weapon, and it punishes bosses. Look at those numbers go. And the batarangs and shuriken weapon that I thought were the same at first, but the shuriken one is weaker and it charges faster. I tend to go with the red batarang. Decent damage and the spread is perfect for crowd control. I do have some major gripes with this game though. There are levels in this game that drag on way too fucking long. This flight stage, for example. Not counting any deaths, this takes about 17 minutes to beat. To put that in perspective, you can beat Super Mario Bros. In 5 minutes. You could beat it 3 times if you're fast enough. A speedrun of Sonic's about 15 minutes. You could watch an episode of C-Lab 2021 in that time. 17 minutes is way too long for a monotonous flight stage. A horizontal flight stage with way too much scrolling. It's not like I'm getting lost or dying the entire time. You can literally cut these stages in half and it would still be too long. The Mad Hatter stage is the worst offender, a testament to the Genesis hardware's ability to have a ton of shit on screen with barely any slowdown. The entire stage is just killing the same robot dolls for what feels like an eternity and nothing else. I could reach the top of the infinite staircase in Mario 64 before this level ends. And just when you think you've beaten the boss and finished the level, even the music drags on. It's hardware pushing for sure, and there's some great chiptunes here. But just like the game itself, it gets repetitive very fast. Seriously, these are some of the longest chiptunes I've ever heard. Also, it sounds more like Streets of Rage 3 than a Batman game. It's still technically impressive, don't get me wrong. Everything about this game is impressive, except for the level design. They're just rooms full of enemies for the most part, and the enemies dogpile you constantly. The boss fights are still great. I really like the Mad Hatter fight with all the pseudo 3D stuff in the background. I can't praise the graphics enough. Just imagine if it was the Penguin and you had to kill penguins instead of robot dolls. Penguins with rockets strapped to their backs too. As for the final showdown with Freeze, it may not be anywhere near as good as his Arkham City fight, but it is still a challenging, yet decent fight. Not nearly as hard as the rest of the game, to be honest. I just wish that the levels were more fleshed out with more attention to the gameplay itself. Shit gets chaotic and you will get overwhelmed with the enemy count at times. But it's still fair in that it lets you start right where you die. And the enemies drop tons of health and power-ups. There's also that Battletoads bullshit, where you share continues with the second player. It may be more style than substance in my opinion, but I would still give it my recommendation. Batman fans will not be disappointed. We're doing the Genesis version of Zero Wing for 2 reasons. One is that the arcade game may look and sound better, but it lacks an auto-fire button. The second reason, the main reason, is that the arcade doesn't have that infamous intro. You know the one. Someone set up us the bomb. How are you, gentlemen? All your base are belong to us. Move Zig. For great justice! English is the gift that never stops giving. But how is the actual game? It's hard as shit, actually. The Genesis version of Zero Wing, which was published by Sega in Europe and developed and published by Toplan in Japan, no North American version unfortunately, is a horizontal shooter with checkpoints. This was the norm for a lot of shooters. Gradius had them, R-Type, Truxton, Veritex had them too, Parodius, Silver Surfer. I don't like checkpoints in my shooters. I'd rather just jump right back in where I died. There is an arcade version of Zero Wing that throws you right back in, so why can't I have that? Especially when you reach the mid-boss, wait long enough, die, and then restart after the mid-boss. That makes no sense. You got 3 weapons, but the green is my go-to. There's also this purple weapon upgrade that only appears whenever it feels like. Some say there's a way to make it appear. Some say it's incredibly random, and others say it's a myth. It showed up for me at random, and I have no idea how to trigger it. I think you have to win the lotto during a blood moon for it to appear. Toplan shooters love to give a ridiculous amount of speed to your ship. We're not hitting Gradius levels of speed anytime soon, but Zero Wing likes to box you into these narrow corridors a lot. And navigating this shit at the speed of sound is like performing open heart surgery with Parkinson's. But you need those speed power-ups because you get bombarded with tons of fast-moving projectiles, and your default speed kinda sucks. Or maybe my brain is broken from playing at the speed of Plaid for so long. Yeah, try dodging these homing missiles at default speed. Did I mention this game is hard as shit? It's one of the hardest shooters I've ever played. Level 5 in particular, I don't even have to explain, just look at this shit. Everything from this point forward is basically the kill screen. Then you get this one mini-boss that I am certain is impossible to kill without tool assist. Sometimes you die before you get the chance to figure out what pattern the boss fires in. Then when you hit a brick wall and you can't progress, you'll understand why I hate checkpoints in shooters. Zero Wing tends to be trial and error a lot of the time. Toplan has such a large amount of confidence in you that the default difficulty is easy mode. You'll find yourself using your options as shields because they're invincible, or using a grapple beam to keep a bomb or an enemy ship as an extra shield. The grapple beam is awesome. Just throwing ships at other ships is really fun, and something to set it apart from the massive library of shooters. I can give ships a pile driver if I wanted to, or take him on an adventure as my new buddy, whether he likes it or not. Zero Wing's soundtrack is actually better on the Genesis. The soundtrack was split up between 3 members of Toplan's music team, and they made improvements to the Genesis version. They've done other Toplan games like Hellfire, Truxton, and Fireshark, etc. Credit where credit is due, the soundtrack is pretty underrated, maybe because it gets weighed down by the memes. Most people tend to overlook how hyped the intro song actually is. This port is fairly accurate to the original as it was handled by Toplan themselves. They also seem to do good work on their Genesis ports. They even gave it 3 different endings, one for each difficulty mode. It's missing the English from the arcade, but the dancing jelly beans are still here. Don't ask me why there's dancing jelly beans. You can actually beat the final boss in this version. I mean, it's possible, but it's also impossible at the same time. The option is there, and there's a cheat code you can use to unlock the test mode. And if you're playing the Japanese version of the game, you can access 32 additional endings. To put that in perspective, that's 6 more endings than Nier Automata. But they're just text with Japanese humor that gets lost in translation. Unfortunately, this is only one player while the arcade was co-op. After you beat the final level, it loops back to level 1 just like other Toplan shooters before it, and that nut-crunching difficulty. But I enjoy it, despite how dickish and horribly localized it is. Seriously, play Thunder Force 4 instead. Just look at this box art. A man in terrible Genji cosplay holding a plastic sword with a malnourished puppy as his sidekick, and a baseball player who isn't even in the game. Can we get a shot of the Japanese box art? Yeah, that's the one. And no, the Statue of Liberty does not join you in your quest, nor can you fight her as a boss. Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi is loosely based off the Sega arcade game Shadow Dancer, which is the second game in the Shinobi franchise. I say loosely because the levels look nothing like the arcade, but the gameplay is still the same. Your objective is to save hostages and look badass while you do it. It's basically Michael Jackson's Moonwalker but with ninjas. You throw shurikens, slash enemies up close, jump between floors, and use magic screen nukes. It's similar to the first game, but now you have a dog who helps you by distracting enemies for you. He also shrinks when he gets blocked and you have to wait for him to return to normal to use him. Whatever happened to the dog? Did it run away when he left the door open? Did he give it up for adoption? Did he sell it for crack? We may never know. The plot is also different as well. In the arcade, you had to collect bombs and stop a group of terrorists. Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi for the Genesis takes place in the distant, faraway year of 1997. Union Lizard is raising hell all over New York City, keeping hostages of people they haven't killed yet. It's up to one man and his dog to save New York. Hayate and his dog Yamato, or Hayate's father, Joe Musashi, depending on the region. I don't even know which version of the manual to trust with this info. If you are playing the North American version, the main character is Joe Musashi, who comes out of retirement after the Revenge of Shinobi. Shadow Dancer plays a lot like the first Shinobi game. Save hostages, fight a boss after a few levels, go to a bonus level, repeat. Hey, remember when Obi-Wan bragged about having the high ground? Yeah, he was full of shit because the high ground sucks in Shadow Dancer. You know what else sucks? One-hit deaths. Everything kills you in one hit. Projectiles, buzzsaws, falling debris, a crater opening out of nowhere, and this creepy fucking wall thing. He can fall off a skyscraper and land on his feet without turning himself into a human accordion, but he dies in one hit? It makes the game a lot harder than some of the later Shinobi games. If you feel like Shadow Dancer isn't hard enough for some reason, you can disable shurikens. I don't know why you would want to put yourself through that. I do like that the game is forcing you to think about your next move before you run in and get yourself killed, and it really makes your dog companion a very welcomed addition. You'll be fending off tons of palette swap ninjas, Crash Man from Mega Man 2, the Green Man from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Most of the enemies look like members of the Foot Clan, while everybody from the arcade version looked like they came straight out of Lethal Weapon. You fought a huge-ass train in that one, and now you fight some fire wheel thing. You know, for a flying wheel of fire, he is a massive pushover. The last level is the kitchen sink level. Shadow Dancer loves to throw tons of enemies at you constantly, including these ninjas who block your shurikens and your dog. It's not as bad as the gunman placement though. Look at this, there's a special place in hell for the guy who did this. I almost forgot about the dark level. Great in theory, garbage in execution. Then there's the final boss. He just sits there and summons black ninjas because he's too lazy to get off his 30-foot ass to fight you. You can't even use magic against him because he covers his weak points before your attack starts. Dick, move! Wait for his head to fly off and shoot him in his neck hole. And congratulations, you saved New York. It's kind of a lackluster fight, and you could slap the ninjas off screen to kill them faster. Shadow Dancer is a pain in the ass, but overall it's a pretty solid game. It feels like a proper sequel instead of a remake of the original. The controls are solid, and the difficulty changes the color of the title screen and the credits screen. You know, I never played the game on level 3, I wonder what that's like. Nah, fuck that. If you haven't already noticed, the music slaps incredibly hard. It's done by the guy who did most of the design work for Sword of Vermilion, Keisuke Sugihara, and he went fucking hard on the soundtrack. Some of these bass lines are just insane. It's not afraid to get weird or dissonant or funky either. Sometimes it rivals Shinobi 3 in terms of music, and I consider that the gold standard of Genesis games. Maybe I'll do a video on Shinobi 3 someday, or maybe cover more of Joe's escapades over the years. From fighting terrorists, to Mecha Godzilla, to racing with Sonic and Has-Been's Racing Transformed. I'm so pissed he doesn't ride a horse in that game. Maybe the PS2 ones. Maybe. It's a damn good series to get into. Also, you and the dog can teabag in this game. I thought you should know that.